welcome back to my channel. I'm Rachel, the owner and creator here at the Eclectic Cottage in Spokane, Washington. Today is Wednesday, and for today's video, I did some thrift flips for my very first of the season Christmas vignette. Mind you, it's a very small vignette, only 3 items, but I really like how they all turned out. I think they work really well together. I'm excited to kind of get started on some Christmas projects. I hope you guys like them too. And without further ado, let's get to today's video. My first project for my small Christmas vignette is this little mirror that I picked up at the Goodwill recently. I love to use mirrors in my Christmas decor because they reflect the light and the glow that is everywhere that time of year. All the Christmas tree lights and the fairy lights and the candle light, all of that. I just think they're wonderful for giving that beautiful glow and reflection, a little bit more dimension in your vignettes. So I grabbed again this little mirror. It's a wood mirror. I wasn't really keen on the 3-tone gold that it already had going on, so I decided to go ahead and paint it. I started by masking it because I am a very messy painter, and this helps my cleanup a little bit. And I'm going in with a couple coats of DIY's Crinoline, which is this gorgeous off-white creamy color that I just love. And the brush that I'm using here has kind of a pointy end to it to really help get that paint down into all of the details on this mirror. Now, if you've never used DIY paint, it is a relatively thick, highly pigmented paint. So for my second coat, I tend to have a mister bottle handy, and I will spray my piece down a little bit with water and use that to help thin the paint out to make sure that I'm getting it down into all of my detail. Not only does it help move the paint around a little easier, but it also helps to eliminate some of the brushstroke marks. Once my frame was dry, it was time to seal my paint. DIY paint is clay-based, and so it can be reactivated with water. So you want to make sure you always seal it. And I knew on this frame I wanted to go over it with some darker wax, and I really didn't want to end up with a super muddy finish. So I'm using DIY's clear liquid patina to seal my paint in first before I go over it with the wax. For my wax, I'm using DIY's dark wax. And again, I'm using my small kind of pointy artist brush to really work that wax down into all of the detail in this frame and give it a good coat before I come back and wipe back the excess. Now you can see here as I begin wiping that excess wax back, I am working in sections. I only do one section of the frame at a time, then go in and wipe it down really well. And you can also see how that dark wax really gives a nice patina to that crinoline paint and stays in all of the detail in this frame and really makes them stand out well. Now, if I had wanted to lighten this up a little bit, I could absolutely take some clear wax and go over the dark wax with that to help remove some of the dark wax. You can use clear wax over the colored wax, kind of like an eraser. So again, if I wanted a little less of a patinaed look, I could absolutely have gone over this with some clear wax. Now, I have to admit, at this point, my mirror doesn't look super Christmassy. So to help give it more of a holiday look, I am going back over all of the detail with some gold wax. This wax is called Eternal. It's by Redesign with Prima, and I'm just tapping my finger into the wax and then gently smoothing that over the details in this little mirror. This step not only helps to really highlight the details in this piece, but it also adds that touch of Christmassy glimmer that I really love to see with my Christmas decor. Once I was finished with that step, it was time to remove my masking tape and clean up my glass. I did end up having to go around with a razor blade to clean up a little bit, but it wasn't too terribly bad, thanks to the masking tape. And then I'm just going to use some Windex and a shop towel to get my glass nice and clean before I put this out on the floor. I absolutely love how this little mirror turned out. I think it will be a perfect backdrop for my small Christmas vignette, and I hope you guys like it as much as I do. My second project for my small Christmas vignette is this chunky pillar holder that I picked up from Goodwill some time back. It was in somewhat rough shape, so I started by giving it a little bit of a sand just to knock off any loose chunks and make sure everything was pretty smooth before I started painting. Once I had everything sanded about as smooth as I could get it, I wiped it back down with a damp shop towel to remove the sanding dust, and then it was time to start painting. Now for this pillar holder, I'm going to be adding decoupage papers to the sides of it. So I'm only going to be painting the base of it and the very top of it with the little black dress. Now, since Little Black Dress is such a dark color, I didn't need 2 full coats, but I did go over the pillar holder in a couple places and just fill in where some of that white was still peeking through. Now, at first I hadn't planned on doing any distressing, but in the end, I did decide to go back in and do some wet distressing along the base and the top to bring some of that white back from underneath the black paint to add some contrast and really show off some of the detail in the base and the top of this pillar holder. And before I moved on to the decoupage paper, I decided it might be a good idea to go ahead and seal my black paint just to keep it protected. And so I'm going over it with a good coat of DIY's clear liquid patina. This way the finish over the little black dress paint will match the finish over the decoupage paper. The last step before I could begin the decoupage process was to paint the flat areas with a coat of white paint. I'm using DIY's Cottage color called White Linen for this. I like the Cottage colors for under decoupage paper because they have a built-in sealer, so you don't have to worry about reactivating your paint and having your paint leach up into your decoupage paper. I'm just going over each of the sides with 2 coats of the white linen paint, and then it will be time to start decoupaging. The The decoupage paper I'm using for this project is called Christmas Flock Masterboard. It's a newer one by Roycycled Treasures. It has all of these fantastically beautiful little elements in it. And so first I decided which of those elements I wanted to feature on my pillar holder. And then as I was doing this, I decided I would cover 2 sides at a time. It would have just been too difficult to me to try and cover all 4 sides all at once. So once I figured out about how much paper I would need for the first 2 sides, I cut that section out. Then I made sure to get it centered kind of where I wanted it, and then I began the decoupage process. So I'm starting on the first side and I'm laying down a good coat of DIY's clear liquid patina. And for this project, I'm just covering that entire first side with that liquid patina. Once I had my medium smoothed out, I took my decoupage paper, centered it as best I could over that side, and then used my fingers to just smooth it down into the decoupage medium. Then I took my little paintbrush and put another coat of the liquid patina over the top, and I also used my paintbrush to help smooth out any bubbles or wrinkles in the paper. Then I moved on to that second side, and again I'm just carefully adding that liquid patina, smoothing the paper down over the top with more liquid patina and my paintbrush until those 2 sides are completely covered. Once my decoupage medium was completely dry, I grabbed some 220 grit sandpaper and I gently sanded all the excess decoupage paper from the sides and the top of my pillar holder. I find that most of the time it's easiest to use a downward sweeping motion for this process, but occasionally when the space is tight, you have to sand back and forth. And in that case, you just need to be careful and take it kind of slow. I also cut off any excess paper at the base of the pillar holder just to make sure everything was nice and clean and tidy. Then it was on to the other 2 sides of the pillar holder, and I am just repeating all of the same steps over again until the pillar holder is completely covered. So I cut out my piece, put my medium down, smoothed it out, placed my decoupage paper over the top, smoothed that out, and then added a second coat of the decoupage medium over the top. And I did the same for the other side. And once everything is dry, I'm going to go in and sand off the excess and use my razor blade to cut off any at the base. And then the decoupaging process will be complete. As a final step, I like to go around and test all of my edges to make sure that everything got laid down. And anywhere the paper is lifted a little bit, I add a touch of the decoupage medium and just rub that back down to adhere it in place. I also took my medium and went around the seams and the edges just to make sure everything was nicely adhered before calling this little project done. This little pillar holder definitely ended up being quite a bit of work, but in the end, I absolutely love the way it came out, and I really hope you guys like it too. My third and final project for my small Christmas vignette is this little treasure box that I had completely forgotten I had until my husband and I went through our storage unit recently. I started by taking out all of the screws and removing the hardware, and then of course giving it a good bath because it was pretty dusty. And before I started painting, I went ahead and smoothed out a few areas that were pretty rough on this little box. Then it was on to paint, and of course I made this project just a little bit harder on myself than I guess I probably needed to, and I am going to be decoupaging the front sections on each of the sides of the box and the top, which means I didn't have to paint the entire box. I only needed to paint those little divider portions on the front and back and also on the lid. So I'm painting all of that with 2 coats of the fancy Farmgirl, and I'm not really being super careful on the divider portions because I am going to be going back in with some white paint once I'm finished with the green. Once I had 2 coats of the fancy Farmgirl down and it was completely dry, I am going back in with my Cottage color called White Linen to paint a base for my decoupage paper. And the reason to use white underneath decoupage paper is that it really helps make your image stand out well and be as clear as it possibly can be. I did end up going over especially the darker portions of this project with 3 coats of that white linen paint. I probably could have gotten away with only a couple coats had it been a thicker paint, but again, I really like the fact that this has that built-in sealer, so for me it was worth the extra coat of paint. And again, for this project, I did go back in and do a little bit of wet distressing over that green paint to bring out some of that beautiful dark wood tone from underneath the green. The beautiful thing about DIY paint is it's very easy to wet distress. You just need a damp towel, or in my case, a shop towel, and then you just rub over the area where you want to remove some of your paint. For my decoupage paper, I'm going to be using another new one by Roycycled Treasures called Christmas Wallpaper, and it comes with 2 different patterns on the same sheet. I'm using the floral pattern for the center of my box, and then I will be using the other pattern for the sides. So I measured out the segments and figured out how much decoupage paper I needed for each, and once I had my pieces cut out, I'm going back in with, of course, my liquid patina by DIY and putting a nice even coat over the top of the lid to start. And then I'm placing that decoupage paper down, making sure that it's nice and straight. And then I'm kind of rubbing down with my fingers to get it adhered, and then going over with another coat of the liquid patina. And just to keep things simple, I did make my paper a little bit longer than it absolutely needed to be, and I'll just go in later and sand off the excess. Once I had that middle section on the top finished, I did both of the front sections on the base of the box. And again, I did cut my paper a little bit long so that I could just go in later and sand off that excess. Once I had finished all of the center sections, it was time to move on to the little strips along each side, and I'm using the plaid portion of the decoupage paper for those sections. So again, I just measured the width, cut out a nice long strip, and then cut those strips to size, laid down my liquid patina, and then very carefully laid each strip down, smoothing it out and placing a second coat of liquid patina over the top. Once all my paper was dry, I came back in with some 220 grit sandpaper and just carefully sanded all of the little bits of excess paper off of the top of the box and also the base. And once that was all finished, I went ahead and sealed the remainder of my fancy Farmgirl paint with the liquid patina. Once I finished this step, I realized there were a couple areas where the white was really still shining through next to some of the decoupage paper. So I did go back in with a little tiny artist brush and fill those places in so that I had nice straight lines and all that white was covered. Then I resealed those areas with the liquid patina. Then, of course, I did reattach the hardware, which I completely forgot to record, and my little box project was finished. I love how it ended up coming out, and I hope you guys like it too. From here for today, you guys. I hope you liked my projects and I hope you enjoyed today's video. What did you think of my little box project? That ended up being a lot of work, but I really love the way those two patterns in that one paper work together, and I wanted to highlight that so you guys had an idea of what they look like side by side. So kind of why I did that project. Anyway, if you did enjoy today's video, please give it a thumbs up. I so appreciate that. And if you haven't already, I would absolutely love it if you would subscribe to my channel. And then of course, just hit the little notification bell so you don't miss anything. And then don't forget to drop a comment below and let me know what you thought of today's projects. Just a quick reminder too, the paint and products you see me use can be purchased through me at my website, and that is www.theeclecticcottagespokane.com. So go there to check those out. And let's see, for Saturday's video, I have a couple things going on, you guys. I'm trying to work on some furniture, and so because I recently sold a few pieces at staging areas that I have some of my furniture at, and I need to replenish, and so I've got a dresser I'm working on, and then I've got, of course, tons and tons of small things in my stash to work on as well. So I'm really not sure at this point what exactly Saturday is going to look like. I will definitely try to have something for you though, so I hope you'll join me back here for that. Until then, have a wonderful rest of your week and beginning of the weekend. Thank you so much for being here, you guys, and I'll see you on Saturday. Bye.